Hello, everyone, and welcome. I hope you're having a great conference, and welcome to this particular session, which is solving legacy IT system limitations with reactive architectures. And welcome to the panel discussion. Excuse me, I'll introduce myself and also my fellow colleagues here on the panel. So just to introduce myself, I'm the CEO of YoppWorks, Jack Gulas. We're a leading consulting organization helping enterprises rethink how they build software to remain competitive, relevant, and capitalize on market opportunities. And we're really excited. You might have noticed that we're a gold sponsor again this year. I think it's the 5th year that we've sponsored Reactive Summit. And again, very excited to host this panel discussion on how to solve legacy IT system limitations with reactive architecture. So let me introduce our panelists today. So very much appreciate their time and their engagement. I'll first introduce Mary, and Mary is a senior developer advocate at IBM. With the Liberty WebSphere team, she focuses on open liberty, microprofile, Jakarta EE, OpenJ9, Java, open source, cloud, and distributed systems. It's quite the role. Fun little fact about Mary, she considers herself a polyglot and loves to continue learning new and better ways to solve real life problems. So welcome, Mary.
Thank you. Also
like to introduce Jeremy. So Jeremy, thanks for joining. Jeremy is the VP of Product and Development Platforms at Lightbend. He's the originator of the ACA Toolkit, and whose co-founder, of course, we know Jonas, was instrumental in deriving the Reactive Manifesto. Jeremy is a veteran with 20 plus years of product leadership with extensive experience in developer-focused platforms. Welcome, Jeremy.
Thanks.
Also like to introduce Reid, who works at YoppWorks, who's one of my colleagues. Reid is our VP of Technology at YoppWorks. He's responsible for our technical strategy, system architecture, and our consulting projects. As also a fun fact about Reid as a trainer and consultant himself, Reid is passionate about Scala, reactive programming ecosystem, as well as designing for efficiency and effectiveness. So welcome to all three of you, and we will begin. So as a format for today, what we've done is we've got 6 questions, which I will ask the panelists to comment on. And we're hoping, knowing that we've got up until 2:55, we're gonna give ourselves a little bit of time for Q&A. So if you do have questions as we're going along, please submit them. I will keep an eye on the questions. And by the end, we are gonna look to submit those questions to our panelists. So let's start off. So as the first question, I would like to ask each one of you, what are your predictions on key areas where reactive systems will become a true business enabler? And I'll start off with Reid.
So for me, one of the things I like about reactive architecture is it's really close match with DDD. And that allows us to have a lack of impedance mismatch between the business and the technology. In other words, we can make technology models that really map exactly to the way the business speaks about it in terms of the language and the structure. So this is using DDD concepts like bounded context and subdomains and events and commands and all those things that we put into a reactive system. So that's sort of the distinguisher for me, is this is going to match a business much more closely than packaged applications did in the past, so that we can, you know, so the value proposition of that business is more clearly stated and more efficiently executed.
Okay, thank you, Reid. So for Mary, what areas for you or reactive systems will become true business enablers in your opinion?
Sure. I feel that there's a big potential in like open, real-time open analytics. From what I've done some research on too recently, I look at them, all the open analytics, they are usually like, they go into like database, the old data warehouse type of processing, maybe more batch kind of scenario. But I think there's a large potential, big potential, right? In terms of like you have data that, you know, you immediately can analyze it as they come. And I feel that the reactive approach will have a large potential to kind of offer in making real-time analytics to be a, you know, more of a reality, I feel. So that's what I think. So yeah.
Thank you, Mary. Jeremy, for you.
Sure, thanks. Gosh, I just realized that my answer is somewhat pessimistic and a downer, because I think that the trends that I think we're seeing out there, we're all seeing it. It's the environment and it's COVID. And I think that fortunately, Reactive has a place to help both. I think in supporting sustainability initiatives, you know, reactive systems, reactive architectures just can be so much more cost efficient. I know Okta is, and we've got great use cases there, but just more generally, and Reid touched on this, is that efficient use of compute and data to solve business problems. And I think in the area of sustainability, reactive systems can play a major role. And certainly with COVID, you can see my COVID background. That's my kids. They're not here now; they're in school, thankfully. But our user experiences, our expectations have just grown exponentially as we all have come online. So having the online be as good, or if not better, than the in-person experience becomes that much more important. And I think reactive architecture and reactive systems can help achieve those user experiences that everyone out there in the world is expecting, because we've all gone online.
Okay, thank you. So for the next question, maybe just to contrast a little bit the benefits of reactive. What would be, in your opinion, the top 3 issues with continuing to use ad hoc approach with monolithic IT systems? And for that one, Jeremy, if you don't mind giving us your impressions.
Yeah, definitely. And I'll speak more to the ad hoc part of this. I think monoliths are good, and microservices are good. Different use cases, different business needs, certainly. But and ad hoc. I mean, gosh, I've been a product manager for 20 years, but I've been coding for a lot longer. And ad hoc and Jeremy programming is probably hand in hand. And I know the systems I build aren't scalable, they're not resilient. I code to do exactly what I need to do today, and that's great for me as a product manager or solving a specific business problem at a point in time. But it doesn't promote repeatability, if I can talk today, where I feel like I'm doing the same thing differently always, and I lose the opportunities to leverage experiences and reuse, and create, most important, predictable systems to know exactly what's going to happen when my system scales, how it performs. Ad hoc approaches ultimately generally yield subpar architectures, and to me, that's a limiting factor to having a business grow and adapt its technology to meet its business conditions.
Okay, thank you, Reid. For you, what are some of the top issues or 3 issues you would think of?
Yeah, the things that come to mind for me are sort of what our customers ask us to do, and the top 2 of those are scalability and resiliency, straight out of the Reactive Manifesto. But that actually is a need in the industry. 2 of our largest customers have specifically come to us to replace an existing system that they've already scaled out to the biggest piece of hardware they can get, and they've got nowhere to go to get more capacity out of it. Reactive systems solve those kind of problems adroitly. And resiliency is another factor that people want their systems up all the time, never go down, fast response. Not that responsiveness isn't important too, but those 2 come up more frequently. And then a third thing too, which is like flexibility and the ability to extend it. So one of the things we were reading recently was about cognitive load on software engineers. And by mapping things out into bounded contexts and microservices, you sort of take some of that cognitive load off, whereas working with a monolith is very complicated because it's all intertwined in one big code base. So those would be the 3: scalability, resiliency, and flexibility.
Okay, thank you. And for you, Mary?
Sure. I think both Jeremy and Reid already summarized it so well. But I'd like to also say too, it will, doing things, especially in an ad hoc approach, to dealing with monolithic systems, it seems as though, you can save money, you can get things done faster and all that, but actually the cost will increase in the long run because it really doesn't address some of the deeper issue, which is like the scalability aspect, resiliency, all of these things that reactive systems are like so good for. So essentially, that will give kind of like a false economy on this kind of ad hoc approach. Yeah, so that's what I think it is. So, yeah.
Okay, so moving to our next question, very well articulated by all 3 of you in terms of the contrast of versus the benefits of reactive. So for the next question, though, and Reid, you even stated, I know about some of our customer experiences, but knowing all of these benefits and the contrast, why are companies who use packaged software with known scaling issues resistant to adopting reactive systems? So, Mary, why don't we start with you?
Sure. I feel that customers in general, too, it's more like, actually, put it that way, it's more a cultural aspect of things. People in general are resistant to change, especially if they already have figure out how they can solve their problem using, a certain way. So it's kind of a very natural approach that they would be like, okay, I don't need to learn something new because it is already working, kind of thing. So it's really a cultural type of aspect. And plus too, I think I myself was in like IT shops before. I was in the trenches. And I can also understand too, sometimes the business problems, and they do kind of get complicated to solve. So it's more like you try to understand it and trying to figure out how to solve it. Then once you figure out how to solve it, then you like kind of stick with it. So in that sense, I think it's just harder to convince people to kind of take a good look at it and do some things the new way. So.
All right, thank you, Mary. So Reid, just off of what Mary was saying in terms of the cultural aspect, do you have other areas?
Yeah, I go a little different on this. So again, this comes from sort of the interactions with customers that I've had, and I think there's sort of three things. One is the learning curve. You go and do a reactive architecture course with them. The course takes 3 days itself, and they sort of go, "Wow, I didn't know any of this stuff. That's a lot, and how are we able to learn all that?" So just the learning curve is a big challenge. Another level of resistance is that, we actually are going to propose to them that they rewrite their system, right? We're going to get you off whatever you were using because it's just not architected correctly. It's a rewrite. And they go, whoa, that's expensive. Well, yeah, that's one of the big resistance areas. And the last thing is like, when I go and teach a customer a reactive architecture course, their reaction to that is, wow, you know a lot of stuff. We need to know that. So we want to rely on the vendor. And they have that with their software too. They want to rely on the vendor so they don't have, responsibility or culpability, and they can take them to court or whatever they want to do. But, they're unwilling to take that responsibility on themselves of like, okay, now we're building our own application and it's on us if it doesn't work. So those are sort of the three things that I've come up against with customers.
All right, thank you. And for you, Jeremy, what do you think are the reasons why some of these companies, organizations resist adopting reactive systems?
Yeah, sure. And I guess I'll share a little secret from product management land. Yeah, I mean, if I had a dollar for every time I saw a roadmap have auto scaling in it, I would be a rich man. It's a classic approach. I mean, everyone does it. They're freezing their customers because they make promises. They're laying out a vision for improving the software. And if you're using packaged software, you're already on their platform. You don't want to move, and some product manager telling you, yeah, we're going to be handling all these scale problems, in the next release or a year from now, you're probably going to freeze them into waiting. And so they'll be like, okay, let me just stay with the current platform and not decide to move off of that. I think that's a big part. Once you're on packaged software, it sometimes can become difficult, especially if you see the promise of a new feature solving all your problems. And to a certain extent, also in combination of that, scale to a certain extent has almost become a commodity where, you can get a lot of scale up to a certain point and never have to worry about it, or at least you think you don't have to worry about it. So it's almost like kicking the can down the road. I don't need to worry about it. That's someone else's problem 5 years from now, if you will. And as such, I'll stick to my current platform.
Okay, great. Thank you. And just as a reminder to all the participants, we will be looking for or doing Q&A at the end of this session. So if you do have some questions, as you're hearing all this great content from our panelists, please submit it, and then we will be addressing them. Okay, be moving to another question. And so I think, Mary, you mentioned culture and organizations are made up of people. So I think it's really interesting as we go a little bit deeper into an organization and we start talking to some key stakeholders like architects or the CIO or even on the business side. But what is your recommendation or what you feel is the best way to deal with reactive architecture skeptics and detractors, if I can use that terminology, in organizations that you interface with?
Sure. I feel that the best way to do is really, if we have like proof of concept, to start small and telling people that, it's essentially, don't fear. They're actually vendors producing really good toolings. And actually that another area too, I like to also see is maybe like vendors to giving a lot more better, like user interface type of kind of way of doing things. If you have those, and then basically solutions architect can go and do a lot of like, proof of concept type of work, like doing MVPs kind of implementation and really prove it to the, skeptics and detractors. I think that would be best. It almost seems like, yeah, and don't complain, let's see, we'll show you what it can do. I think it would be more convincing to those who are like skeptical about this architecture. So,
how about you, Reid? What's sort of an approach or a way that you feel like you deal with them?
One of the things I've heard is like, that's going to take way more data. You start doing CQRS, now you get double the amount of data on any given bounded context. And so the data amount starts to grow, but I just remind them, but data is driving towards zero cost. I mean, it's getting cheaper and cheaper every year. So yeah, we're going to use that fact of cheap data as a way to get some scale and some isolation. And speaking of isolation, another one is reactive architecture is too complicated, but isolation being one of the key principles of reactive architecture is allowing that system to be partitioned, to be better react to change, to scale better, et cetera. There's a lot of benefits of decomposition. Another one is, more recent and probably very much Jeremy's thing. Akka serverless is there. It reduces sort of a lot of the cognitive load of doing a reactive architecture system. It can be integrated with other things as well. So it's that's another option that's come up recently. And to echo Mary, I think POVs, proof of value projects is a great way to sort of get a toehold with the customer and say, look, we're not just talking this game, we're going to show you in weeks that this actually works. That's it for me.
All right, great. Jeremy, in your opinion?
Yeah, cool. And I'm probably going to go a little bit longer since I feel like this is like the heart of it all. Certainly, it's why I'm here at Lightbend. I joined about a year ago, and to a certain extent, I was tired of being a PM for platforms that had lots of outages. And I don't know if anyone enjoys getting the 2 a.m. call to get online in an ops room and start troubleshooting and start managing communications because you're down. It's not fun at all. Like, I don't want to pour salt on the wounds of Facebook and Roblox, 2 big recent outages that have happened. But, having a hashtag your company down is not fun. It's not fun for you publicly. It's terrible internally. Outages. My mom isn't listening right now. I'm a little bit too old to be worrying about my mom, but outages suck, to use a terrible word. And reactive architecture is a great way to be thinking about building your systems in a way that limits the exposure to outages, limits the pain, if you will. And I think the other thing too around this is, along those lines though, is thinking about just being a better engineer. I had one of my mentors a long time ago was discussing and talking with a room full of engineers, and someone asked, how can I be a better developer? And his answer was, I think your question is, how do you become a better engineer? Like, engineers think differently, and developers and development is important, but just thinking about architecture and systems really is super critical to engineering an application, a solution. And I think reactive architecture gives you the tools to think differently, to think better and become a better engineer. And it's not architecture for architecture's sake. It's just trying to build better systems and applications so we can all have better experiences and have less outages and less PM suffering. And you can do all this today with Akka serverless, just in my plug.
We need to count how many times we plug in the Akka serverless. Okay, great. So thank you for that. Let's move on to our next question, and maybe use a YoppWorks terminology. So we actually have a methodology we've built at YoppWorks. We call it Reactive Horizons, and it really is a methodology by which we evolve with customers on how they engage with the reactive architecture and how they deploy it within their enterprise. So just to use our terminology in terms of reactive horizons, which alludes to that there's always more coming. What is next on the horizon for reactive architecture and solving these legacy IT system problems? Maybe Jeremy, since you were on a roll in the last question, I can ask you to go first again here.
Sure. And I have my clock, my timer to tell me how long I'm talking. So hopefully I won't go too long on this one, but I think we're doing okay on time too.
Yeah,
so
we are doing good.
I will riff a little bit here, if you will. I think for us, at Lightbend, and of course, I'm going to be talking about Lightbend, Opt-in, and Akka serverless. That's great. I love it. But for us, it's taking a step back, and what we see in the horizon is just thinking about data differently. So we're all moving, we're all going everywhere. There's data mobility everywhere. It's the edge, it's the metaverse, whatever that ends up being. It's Web3, blockchain. It's like, you can't go a day without hearing all these great terms and architectures. And yes, serverless is great because we see serverless databases popping up each and every day, and that's awesome as well. And I just that notion of where you put data and how it moves across these different applications and systems is becoming more and more important in the world as we think about the edge and 5G and how we think about experiencing applications in a highly distributed way, perhaps not even connected to the network. And so for us, we see it as kind of a spectrum of data access and data management, making sure that we have systems that can put the data where it needs to be, perhaps just for a certain amount of time necessary to achieve whatever the objective of the application is. In a 5G world, of course, you can imagine, small points of presence localized to a specific, set of gamers, perhaps for online gaming. Perhaps even better, you can imagine things like facial recognition for online board or for boarding of planes, where biometric data needs to be local, but only local for a very specific point of time, the boarding process, and then disappears. So that data mobility angle, I think, is really something that we see is coming up front and center for lots of folks as they think about this distributed world, how they put data, where they move it to, and how long it stays there. And of course, handling the conflicts as data updates are made in real time.
Great, thank you, Jeremy. How about you, Mary?
Yeah, I think, again, I go back to this analytics side of things. It's more really, to me, I feel the business is recognizing from the data, you can actually figure out a lot of things out of it. So analytics kind of become really important in that sense. And I really feel that this aspect of applying like reactive to doing analytics is kind of still so unknown. And I really feel that would be an area that can leverage, analytics can definitely be leveraging on the event-driven, on the kind of reactive way of doing things. And I myself too would be interested too. I started reading up a lot more into this, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm looking at some of these people doing the analytics side of things. They are more data warehouse and ETL and all of these things. And I really am thinking, can we actually employ this asynchronous, way of streaming and doing things in a reactive way? I feel that there's a, kind of an untapped area that reactive can kind of get into. So yeah, it's just a matter of time, I think. Yeah, that's what I think. So, yeah.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
How about you, Reid? I mean, you're the author of, in our company, Reactive Horizons. How do you see it? Where is this going?
Lots of different directions. So I agree with that. The much more focus we put on the analytics. So that was one of the things I had in my answer, but I won't go on now. That there's other things. So one of them is an emergence of a rapid prototyping tool for DDD. It's really important to be able to generate code, or at least the bad parts of code that we never like, the infrastructural stuff that's boring and not really related to the domain. If we could have a really high level specification for DDD and a web interface and a tool that allows us to just sort of drag and drop various concepts like bounded contexts and entities and messages between them, and putting things into message queues like Kafka, that would sort of give us the way to sort of visually lay out a very large vision for a customer. And I see the need for this continuing to develop. We do this manually with a collection of tools at YoppWorks today, but I'm really looking for sort of a silver bullet here that not only gives us pictures and diagrams or generates a website, but actually can generate a bunch of the infrastructural code that matches the design. And then when you change it, it goes and modifies that code. And that's actually the tricky, hard part of it. So that's sort of that's on my wish list of things that I'm looking forward to either build or collaborate with others on. The other one sort of in progress, it's related to Akka serverless, but being the open source guy that I am, I'd like to see that sort of turned into a toolkit. So Akka serverless, not hosted, and you want to go build it yourself, give us all the tools to do that and extend it and do more things with it. So I'm hoping that that becomes a reality. And then more what Jeremy was saying on, going to the edge and moving data to the edge. I totally agree that that's important. But I see that coming out in lots of different ways. Like I would like to see akka running natively on an iPhone, where I can do local akka persistence on a phone's data. Like I think the new ones have a terabyte of data. Like there's plenty of space on a phone these days, and there's no reason it can't participate in distributed transactions or even just local things using reactive techniques like akka persistence, CQRS. Not so much a need to do lots of cluster-wide things, but if you can do if your phone can be part of a cluster that's the rest of it's in the data center, I think there's a lot of opportunity for some really interesting WAN size kind of collaboration. The other way is with other clients, right? So with other phones, maybe all the phones on a local area network. And a fundamental thing that's needed there is native code generation. And I see this going across a bunch of technologies, right? The JVM's moving in this direction. You're going to eventually have something that's just in the JVM and like, do you want to generate this native, ahead of time, or you want a JIT, or do you want both? Right? Do you want to generate some of it and allow, to do class loading that gets generated at runtime? But I see, Scala and akka. There's a Scala native project where we could piggyback on top of the future JVM that supports ahead of time compile. So I see that sort of story completing and becoming used in something like an akka version that runs natively on iOS or on Android or anywhere for that matter. And that being able to have these larger clusters that include everything at the edge could be very interesting to have as a framework to program with.
Thank you.
Yep.
Jeremy, Reid was giving us some insight there for the future roadmap of akka serverless. I don't think we get
I was about to say, Reid, it's now my personal mission in life to have akka running on an iPhone. That way, I can explain to my wife like what I do and what akka is. She's like, "What actor? Where?"
Right? Yeah. Like, show me an actor. Find it in there. Yeah.
Exactly. That is my personal mission in life now. So.
All right. Cool. Love to see it.
Okay, we're coming up to our last question here. Although I always have some bonus questions, but. Just as a reminder to all the participants, if you do want to submit a question, please do so, and we'll do it. We'll get the panel to answer. Okay, so for the next question, and this is the opportunity, I think, to put in more shameless plugs if you feel you want to, and or anybody in the ecosystem for that matter. But what would be the platform, and platform can be pretty broad, I guess, as a definition here. Do you prefer to deploy reactive systems on? So, Mary, I'll start with you.
Sure. I guess, with IBM, so there's Red Hat, and so I naturally will kind of lean towards Kubernetes, and it will be OpenShift. So that would be like anywhere where there's Kubernetes and OpenShift. And also, too, will be interesting, too, to actually kind of, we're looking into Quarkus, too. Quarkus being you're able to mix the declarative and reactive code together to run in the same runtime. So I think there's definitely a lot of potential in there as well. So.
Okay, thank you, Mary. Reid, how about you?
Agree with everything Mary said. I think my favorite place would be Google Kubernetes Engine, so GKE on GCP. But really, to support our customer base more generally, pretty much anywhere that Kubernetes runs, that's the target for us. And to piggyback on what I just said, and on the iPhone, that would be pretty cool too.
Okay, I think I know what Jeremy's about to say, but I'm going to go and ask Jeremy.
I have three favorites.
Oh, you do? You have three. Okay.
Serverless.
Sorry?
Yeah.
So akka serverless 3 times, is that what you said?
Exactly, akka serverless. But all kidding aside, though I do love akka serverless. I mean, I think I was just actually, as you mentioned, kind of the other technologies and other platforms out there. I think it's, and Mary and Reid hit so many great ones. It's like it's such an exciting time to be a developer, an engineer, and there's so many awesome technologies that are being brought to market out there in open source, out there in closed source, as a service, whatever. And it's like it's awesome because you're like, I've got this problem, this business problem. what can I bring together to bear to solve that problem? And just for Akka serverless, yes, I love it. It's awesome, but it's also a piece of the puzzle. Like it's not, it has to integrate with other systems. It has to integrate with a Kafka, a Google Pub Sub. It runs on Kubernetes underneath the covers. It has to be a good citizen, if you will, in the world of reactive systems, in all systems more generally. And I think what's interesting there too is like also trying to find what the right integration points are so that you can have your entire solution, perhaps Akka serverless plus a whole lot more, kind of working in concert together to yield the value and the output that you're trying to get to. And a weak link can be a weak link that really disrupts the overall solution. But anyway, I just love the platform, thinking about more technologies rather than just a specific cure-all for everything. I don't think it exists, but there's lots of great stuff out there to help developers and engineers build great solutions out there today.
Okay, great. So thank you. Again, reminder, if you have any questions you'd want to submit, I do have a couple bonus questions that I'm going to ask as we have about, I think, 15 minutes left to go here. With these questions, I'm just going to leave it up to you on who wants to answer in what order. So even though I'm the host of this panel, I myself I'm also a very big enthusiast around reactive architecture and reactive systems. And we're a huge Lightbend partner, so clearly we're big on the Lightbend tech. But I wanted to take the question, and when we've kind of talked a little bit about this, but in terms of working with advocates within an organization to deploy reactive architecture, and in my experience, one of the things that really helps is to get a project or the business to sort of buy into the benefits and not just sell to the IT side of the house, right? We've actually found that some of our projects were actually getting delayed or blocked because we only got endorsement from the IT side. In your experience, or even just your opinion, like how do we bring the reactive architecture benefits to the business and not just to the technology side? Anybody want to take a stab in answering that?
Yeah, for me, it's about education, but it's about depth of education. So you say, well, it's scalable and it's resilient. Okay, what does that actually mean? Other things are scalable, other things are resilient. So you have to put it into sort of at web scale, right? What do you do when your 2 millionth customer signs in concurrently, and your monolith just sort of choking on that? It's how do you stay scalable while being still responsive, right? Having sub-second response times, and being able to be responsive and scalable while there's problems going on in your back end and nobody noticing, right? That's resiliency. So it takes a lot. There's theories underneath this. There's the scalability things gets into Gunther's universal scalability law and Amdahl's law and why these things matter. Not that those things aren't known, but they're not known at the business level. And so mapping all these features that are very deeply technical into the business result that comes out is kind of where I think the education falls a part of it. Right? We can do all the technical education with the techies, but trying to get that message across and what does this mean to the business, right? What does it mean to have a system that is just going to be pretty close to infinite scaling? This is going to grow for a long, long time and not have to be rewritten. That's kind of the nut of it for me. It's like how do you bridge that gap, in awareness and education.
Yeah, I think,
Jeremy, do you have another way of saying that downtime sucks for the business?
Yeah, I think that generally is good.
That also works for them too. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think it's been a challenge for Lightbend specifically around Akka for quite some time, where and this is like a number one thing that customers, it's interesting as a PM. You ask, what do you want from Lightbend, or what can we put on a roadmap? And they're like, no features. I just need a way to articulate the value and sell it to the business. And we've seen this time and time again. And actually, we spent a lot of energy over the last year, I would say, in trying to get instruments and tools and documents that can help support our champions and our teams that are on the ground building to actually sell and promote and help the business understand the value. This is a shameless plug, I get it. But actually we had Forrester do a total economic impact report on Akka. So we said, hey, go do it. They don't talk to us at all. They just talk to our customers and our users. It's super valuable that we're finding with our customers for them to be able to say to their business, hey, let's dig into this, non-biased economic impact report, because this will be one way for you as a business to understand not just avoid downtimes, but also what are the real tangible business benefits that you can get from this sort of architecture.
Great, thank you, Mary. Did you want to comment on this?
Yeah, I feel like, right, maybe, we're talking a lot too, especially reactive, like into the technology, all the deep things that nerds kind of like to talk about. But if we're marketing to business, they don't care as much of the nerdy stuff, even though we love it. I feel actually also from talking with some other startup companies, they are beginning to say that if you design a really good user interface, a GUI thing, actually people love it, because then you kind of quickly, okay, I plug something in, and you basically have to know ahead of time what is the solution they are looking for to solve their problem, and then you build that kind of UI. I think it will be kind of more convincing in some ways, because then you are taking away their concern of some of these like routines of dealing with things, but it abstract out all of these complicated to them, right? They don't want to deal with like OpenShift. You do all of these steps and you kind of already take care of things for them, like to some kind of easy to use user interface. I feel, if you can we can produce that kind of things and understand how they want to use the software to solve their problem, and you build those user interface, I think it can be kind of a good selling point. I feel, that's just what I think. So yeah.
So back to the title of our panel, which was Solving Legacy IT System Limitations with Reactive Architecture. The other terminology that's often being put to also solve legacy IT system limitations is cloud. We've talked around it a little bit. I guess my next question, and it's one that I kind of deal with on a daily basis, but how do we apply the principles of reactive in kind of cloud native architecture discussions that are happening today? And how does the reactive side stay relevant when people are also considering cloud as the solution to solve IT system limitations? Who wants to take that one?
I think.
Oh, maybe it was too hard of a question and everybody puzzled on it. Reid, you must have an answer on this. You and I philosophically have these conversations all the time.
I'm sure I have an answer. I think I have an opinion. I think cloud is really good at some things, but there's no sort of reactive cloud offering that is going to take your business, break it up by DDD into a bunch of bounded contexts and implement it for you. That just isn't going to happen in the cloud because it's too specific to a particular domain. And so that's where I think it fits, right? When we want to model a business in software, then the way to do it is with DDD and reactive. And there's nothing stopping a reactive system from making use of BigQuery or any of the analytic tools on GCP or anything, right? It's like we can run anything on the cloud. So it's not restrictive in that form, but I think that the place it really fits is in modeling a business.
Yeah,
and that all can run on Kubernetes in the cloud.
Yeah, I think that's great. I see, as you kind of were talking about the cloud too, it's like even moving beyond the cloud. I guess one of the things I hope, maybe, I guess in the grand scheme of things, if BigQuery and all the other databases and services end up solving all of the resiliency and performance issues out there in the world forever, then I guess that's a good thing. I suspect it won't happen for all use cases and do that in an efficient way as well. And I think that notion of modeling your business and your domain in a rational way and then planning for it, I think is a great one. And just thinking about more than just the cloud. So, the cloud is there today. I can't believe it's the final stepping stone for all of our technology investments. The world is going to change and be different. And the thing I really like about the domain-driven design and the reactive systems and reactive architecture and the way of thinking is just thinking about your system somewhat almost independent of the underlying technology, and in theory that should allow us to move our businesses forward as technology forever improves.
We do have a question in Q&A. Mary, do you want to take a stab at that one, or do you want me to move to the Q&A question?
Yeah, I was going to say Jeremy and Reid kind of summarize this real well. It's really like understanding the business modeling. It's we have to think in terms of what the business wants, and then kind of look into what the technology can serve them, rather than saying that okay, these technology can do a whole bunch of things, and but what does it serve, and kind of thing. So yeah, but that was good. Yeah, what Jeremy and Reid said. So yeah, please move on to the next question. So
okay,
yeah.
okay, thank you. I think this is just carrying on a little bit from the question we asked, question one back, but received a question in terms of what's the best way to bridge the knowledge, maybe knowledge gap as well, between non-technical clients and the solution architects that are technical. So how do we narrow that gap? I think, Reid, you talked a little bit about the reactive architecture course and things of that nature, but how do we make reactive systems and reactive architecture not technical for business people, I guess, is part of the question here.
I alluded it to in the other answer, which is you've got to focus on what matters to the business people, right? The non-technical client, which is results that lead to money results, right? Things that matter to the business. So if we can save them money or make them money, that's sort of where you got to focus. You have to translate all the technical reasons into those kind of terms. It's not easy because it's very domain specific, and it depends on how their money and what their business is, what the customers, how they do everything. And so we want to. Sorry, my microphone disconnected there for a second.
I think Reid got an audio issue.
So anyways, I'll carry on.
Yeah. Why don't we pause you so you can see if you can fix that audio issue, and then maybe I'll ask Jeremy or Mary to comment.
Mary, would you like to comment?
Maybe Jeremy, you go first. Yeah, okay. I kind of was trying to get my thoughts together. So
I guess it's interesting. I remember distinctly the first moment I read the Reactive Manifesto, and again, I'm a PM running API runtime environments in production as a service for over a decade. And it's like, of course, I want my application to be resilient and responsive and scalable and elastic and all the great things about the Reactive Manifesto. And it's just like, what am I missing? And then, of course, I get into Lightbend. I'm like, okay, well, it's not as clear cut as just saying that to convince people that they should be investing in these sorts of architectures. But I think Reid touched on a lot of the great, trying to translate that value, and it's not just cost savings and that sort of thing, but it's also having business folks just understand the implications of inferior, wrong word, but different architectures that aren't as resilient and scalable and elastic, because there are real costs to the business, both short-term and long-term. And I think we on the technical side sometimes, and Mary mentioned this before, we don't paint enough of the story and the kind of the vision, if you will, of what happens when we make these different technological decisions, these different architecture decisions, and how the world can be different now and into the future if we go reactive. So spending less time coding and more time communicating to the business perhaps is an approach that we can use to make sure that the business people understand the implications of this sort of architecture, the positive implications.
Yeah, I think same too. I find that maybe as nerds ourselves, we need to stop, getting, not to say all stop, but it's still we interested in what we're doing, but let's listen to what, the business people really needs. And then also, that's actually very important. Like pause a little bit, really listen and digest what the needs are. And then from there, you figure out something and then guide them to small steps, one step at a time, like illustrate that you can actually use a reactive way to do things better. I think that probably will be like a good way of bridging like the gap, between the non-technical and the business like solutions architect. So yeah.
Okay, I'm just looking at time here. I think we have 2 minutes left. So just respectful of the schedule. I think we have the opportunity for maybe a couple final comments or closing comments. So unfortunately, I don't think we have time to go through the more questions, but if any of you want to maybe just provide a few comments, closing comments in terms of what would you say from everything we've discussed today would be, the one sort of little nugget that you would highlight is the best way to kind of solve this. So maybe in one little final thought, Jeremy.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I go back to my comment earlier, which is there's so many great technologies out there, so many different projects, open source projects, technology solutions. There's lots of choices for us as developers and engineers. And I think just trying to take a step back, not get caught up in the hype, get caught up in the hype of Akka serverless for sure, but don't get caught up in the hype and just take a step back, try to figure out what your requirements are today and what they're going to be like tomorrow, and start to think about building architectures that can last more than just, 100,000 users or 6 months or whatever. Just trying to really understand your requirements to plan for the future, leveraging all these great technologies out there.
Thank you. Mary, final comments?
Sure. Maybe short and sweet is we keep recalibrating, what it is out there. Basically, we are interested in what we're doing, but let's also listen to see what's needed out there. And then we keep recalibrating and then making what we're trying to do, fine-tune it for what's being needed. I think that's my thinking. So,
how about you, Reid?
Echo Joe's ideas. I think sorry, I'm distracted by the question I was answering online. We're running out of time here, so I'm just going to ask you to restate the question because it lost the context.
Oh, just final comments, but no problem. So I'll just sign off here by thanking all the participants for joining, but also very much to my colleagues who joined the panel. So Mary, Jeremy, and Reid, thank you for your time today. And it's been a real pleasure, and we feel really fortunate to have been at Reactive Summit and to participate in this panel. So thank you very much, everyone, and have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you. You too.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.